It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. Happy holidays to you. Hope everything's going well as we continue to move into the end of 2022. Probably one of the more fascinating years in real estate that we've seen probably forever. I know in 21 years, I've never seen anything remotely close to it. And it just continues to fascinate me daily as to what this industry can and cannot do. It is very unpredictable where it used to be predictable. It's not anymore. And that's fine because real estate in general, if you look at a chart over the years, it literally looks like this. Okay. And like if you draw two parallel lines, in the end, real estate always does well. So it doesn't matter whether it's predictable or not. It really just becomes a matter of being able to go with the ups and the downs. And probably one of the more interesting things as we move into 2023 is that the agents who have been doing so well for so many years, especially the last 10, and have never experienced a downturn, this is probably going to be their first exposure into, well, how do I deal with that? Now, what's fortunate for them is that they're probably not going to see much of a downturn. I think what they've seen already is really the breaks. And as we move into the beginning of the year, it already looks like the market is trying to kind of repair itself and hold up. The interest rates, we're all kind of surprised, have not continued to go as high and have even dropped, which is interesting because we have been pretty insistent upon the fact that rates were going to be at 6.5 to 7.5 as we move into 2023. And right now they're really sitting in the upper fives. So it makes us wonder whether the government's trying to keep them there because they did see the lull in housing and they don't want that to happen. Clearly when it comes to the economy, housing is super important. And the last thing the government ever wants is for the economy to be affected because housing's bad. So one of the many benefits about real estate and being a realtor in general is the fact that the government doesn't want to see us struggle. And they usually do their best to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, typically when rates are higher, it tends to push a pause into the way we sell real estate. But at this point, it looks like they're trying to heed that off or cut it off to where we can continue to get people back into buying and selling houses in a healthy market. And at a 5 to 6 and even a 7% interest rate, it is a healthy market. So 2023 is going to bring a lot of interesting events for most real estate agents in there. Now, as always, I bring a lot of my folks on to help me with this. I can't do these shows without them. And a lot of times in certain areas, their expertise is stronger than mine. And this is definitely one of them. Today we're going to talk about investment, and it's a cornerstone to real estate. I'm a big proponent of an agent being a investor. In fact, I really don't think you can be that great of an agent at some point in your career until you have done some type of investing or been a part of some type of investing. So today, I've got several professional investors that work with us, and today you're going to get to see a couple of them. Andy Webb, a longtime friend of mine, longtime agent of mine. He really is an expert in investing, and I'm more impressed with the fact that his expertise is because he wanted to do it for himself and his development of his family. So he's going to talk to us a lot today. And then our next episode, we're actually going to have Andy join us again. And one of our other professional investors, Alan Richardson, Alan Rogers is going to be on. And I was thinking about Alan Richardson, who I was talking to earlier. So funny, two ARs. Alan Rogers is going to be on the next show to kind of key in with Andy on some of that. And of course, Richa always joins us every once in a while. Her expertise in general is always great to hear. She is familiar with investing as well, not as much as Andy is, but her take and her comments are always welcome, which is why we love when she takes the time. Super intelligent woman there, and fantastic to always have her on the crew. She's a longtime friend and agent as well. So, Richa, thank you for coming on today. Andy, it is a fascinating market right now. You know, even I have to be puzzled by how this stuff is piecing together. You know, I'm curious what your take on it is from the investment side. Even the last couple of months have kind of tweaked themselves in a way we wouldn't have thought. How are you looking at that right now? What are your thoughts? And as you do that, I'm actually going to look at some of the agenda we were supposed to talk about this morning.
Right. Well, I think we're going to talk about working with investors this segment, but
no, that's good too. All general comments. So
yeah, sure. I'm an investor. I was just chatting with Richa before we started, and like her, I'm exclusively a landlord. I am not a flipper. Just so the viewers understand that I'm a buy and holder.
Tell them the difference between that. Tell them why. Tell them the old Robert, whatever his name is, about flipping versus holding. Why is it? What's the difference between the two?
Well, the big difference is, the way I view it is with flipping, it's always, you still have to hustle. You buy one house, you fix it up, you sell it. Maybe you hold it for a couple of months, maybe 4, maybe 5, depending on the market. You get your earnings, your profit, hopefully. From a tax perspective, it is earned income. You've earned it. You had to work to do that, and you got to go on. You got to do the next one and the next one after that to continue to keep the income coming in. Whereas I'm a buy and hold guy, rentals, right? I like to buy them and keep them, and they cash flow. They just constantly kick off cash flow. I put them into place, fix them up front is the way I do it, and I forget about them. Keep an eye on them, do things here and there, but we always have income coming in as cash flow.
How do they say you flip to get rich and you hold to get wealthy, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And there's a difference between the two.
But to your question with the market now, I've always bought for cash flow. And one thing we do see is that cash flow is becoming compressed as those interest rates go up, because I do finance. I'm not a cash guy. I want to have as little money in the investment as I can. That magnifies my returns, right, on a cash on cash perspective. But because I do finance, that leverage, the cost of that debt has gone up. So my cash flow goes down. We bought 2 houses on the same street, closed a month apart, and rates popped from one closing to the next. So my cash flow on one is about $100 less than on the other.
Which makes a difference at times, right?
It can. Yeah, it can. It depends, again, on how you're operating. But, these were new builds. Normally we go in and we do full rehabs, right, where we're making everything new on existing product. But in either case, we're trying to put something together that's in really good shape, so we have very little maintenance issues. So it's just for me, a function of the cost of the debt right now. Yeah. We're in Dallas, Texas. We've invested in Houston, but we're focused on Texas. And I think the good news, if your viewers right now are in Texas, there was a report that came out recently that put Dallas-Fort Worth, the broader market, as the number 2 market going into 2023. This was published by PricewaterhouseCoopers and the Urban Land Institute. I forget the name of the study. Dallas-Fort Worth number 2, behind Nashville, which was number 1. If you look at our other big Texas markets, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, they were all in the top 14 markets to look at going into 2023. So to your point earlier, did we hit the brakes? I think in Texas, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Outside of Texas, maybe something more is coming. Don't know. But here in Texas, I think we're in a really good spot.
Yeah, I was more concerned clearly as we got into November and December, and even for us personally, it's been some of the slower months that we've seen in a long time. And literally, the income wise, probably a 30 to 40% drop in those 2 or 3 months, that's something we expect to see when the market taps its brakes. Now, what's comforting And and it's funny. This is hypocritical too, and this will surprise anybody that's listening. I actually got just a tad irritated about the rates going lower, and so hear me out on this because we're trying to educate a general public that the rates have been way too low and they're supposed to be higher, and they should be somewhere around 7 to 8% historically. And we were heading that way, and we were getting the general public to understand it because they put the brakes on buying because they're like, it's going to lower. And we're like, no, it's not. It's not going to lower, and you need to be prepared for that. So we're finally getting people to understand it, and then they drop it to where it does drop, and it looks like it's going to like stay a drop for a little while. And it encourages people like, oh, well, you see, I told you. You're like, that's not what was supposed to happen. So it was almost irritating the way they did that, because that pause was sincere. When you cross a 7% rate, it put the brakes on for good, and people would have eventually started buying either way, but they sped it up by lowering them. And to me, sometimes it gives a false sense of reality. But now I'm of the opinion that if they did drop it, maybe they are intending, maybe they saw that the initial effort was too strong and too many people really hit the brakes on it, and they knew what that would cause if they went into the following year. So I think they tried to stabilize it, and it brings us to the comment that you just made. It gets people like, you know what, this is a good enough market for me. And for all of the agents that watch us, Andy's comment is very interesting. He's looking at it from a financial standpoint, how it affects him. If someone like him is going to say that he feels, especially in Texas, since our shows watch more in Texas than most states, is that we're in good shape. He's right. We are. And if for someone like him, if he thinks we're in good shape, then that means for the general home buyer that's looking for the white picket fence, we're probably in good shape for them too.
And if I could just add, I'm sorry, the other side of the thing with the rentals, and Richa, you've got rentals too. You've probably experienced, the appreciation in the prior decade was crazy. We'll still have that. But the other reason I like to buy, especially the fixer-uppers, I don't see this on the new builds we bought, is through the purchase process and buying the renovation, the rehab type properties, we create a lot of equity. And even I just want to mention this because though my cash flow now is compressed, what I'm seeing is that we are starting to see better buying opportunities at lower prices. So our equity that we capture, that we create through that renovation process, instead of here, it's getting bigger. So there are trade-offs there. So maybe I don't hold those houses quite as long, and I sell those to when the rates change. But
sure,
it's the other side of the coin there. And sorry, Richa.
Richa, I always forget that you have rentals. I always bring you on just because your expertise is so strong with so many areas in real estate. I forget that you have some.
Yeah, I think I think Andy hit everything nail on the head. I think the equity part of it, I think, is the light at the end of the tunnel during this time, right? And generally, home buyers, whether it be for your personal investments or your own main residence, people, yes, the rates are going up, so people are being able to buy half the house for double the price. Right? They're used to 2%, 3%. And you're right. They're getting shocked when it's 6, 7, 8, which is where generally the market should be. But the comment about equity is where it's at. So, just for a very general breakdown of equity for somebody that might not understand truly what equity is, you think you bought the house for $300,000 is how much equity you have. And that's not how equity works, right?
Right.
You buy a house for $300,000 and you got a $200,000 loan on it. That $100,000 gap is how much equity you have in the property. So a lot of the times, depending on rental properties and how you use the money, whether you do financing, some people finance the equity out of their first property to buy the next one, or you just get a new loan or a new loan for each property. It depends on how there's so many investment techniques that you can use to create the right cash flow, depending on how much you have and what kind of, credit history you have, how good of a, do you have any penalties for loans or anything like that? And so I think it's a very complex topic that we're talking about here, and so it's very hard.
Because you interweave financing, investing, and strategy.
And time of year. and timing, and what conditions are out there in the economy, right?
Yeah.
Early COVID, nobody was doing anything. Everyone was panicked. Everyone was sitting tight, but investors were out and about.
Sure.
They don't stop working.
Investors
right?
always find a picture that's bright to them in any type of real estate market. Of course, well,
for their own use, right? So they're looking at general functionality of the space, of the home, where location, right? Where a majority of the public might want to use the property for their own residence, right? When you're purchasing for yourself, there's a whole other set of glasses that you put on to look for a property for yourself versus what you look at for an investment purpose.
Which that's great, because that's what our second session is going to be about. We're actually going to talk about on the personal side. If you want to do this, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Why do you do these things? So that's actually a great transition to what we're going to talk about on that next episode, because we do want to educate people on, hey, are you really considering this? Well, if you are, these are some of the things that you need to know. So go ahead.
That many people, I feel like I say it every time on your podcast when I'm here. Please stop watching HGTV. That is not real life investing. That's not real life anything. And I think that's what happens is novice investors, and I think every investor, you lose money your first couple of projects that you go on, because you just come in thinking, oh, I'll spend this, and then you don't budget in for unforeseen circumstances that can happen anywhere.
Which is why you should use a real estate agent who's done investing, because they'll help you with that. They'll tell you.
They will help you with that, right? So working with the right partner, working with the right vendors. And I'm not talking about just for lending. I'm talking for, like he's saying, right? And he was saying you're generally buying fixer-uppers. So having a good flooring person, having a good handyman, having a good electrician, having a good plumber. I mean, those are very, very difficult to find. They don't just always exist. And just because they have a plumber.
That's a good comment too. That's a comment I want to talk about. So we're talking about whether you flip or you hold, which one's better. What do investors look at? How do they look for them? Well, one of the things that comes into that conversation is about, if you are going to flip, flipping's a quick, you get in there, you buy it distressed, you put your sweat equity into it, and the people that to get it to where you think it needs to sell at, and you make that profit. But that really does depend on the level of contractors you have. Andy and Rich I know are well versed in this, but Alan talks a lot about this too, where he, Alan, his contractors, he knows the guys that are going in there, they're going to do it at a certain price, and he knows what that budget is when he goes in there. So if he was going to flip, and it's funny, him and Andy are very similar. They're not big into flipping, but they both understand it. And Alan, if he goes into a property and he knows he's going to flip it, he would have to know that he has the contractors ready, that he can fix those problems at a certain amount and sell it to where he is going to make, at least 20 to 30K. And, it was a fascinating conversation. We got to get your guy, your hard money lender guy on here sometime, Andy, because I really thought he was great the last time we talked. But he said something that I really love. We said a lot of things I love, but one of the main ones is so many novice investors think that they're going to make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 on the investments, and whereas usually the acceptable, what one would hope for, is somewhere around 25 to 30K. You've done well if you find that. But so many people are like, oh, I have this huge equity gap. I'm like, you only have that after you fixed it, and you're still able to sell it for above. It doesn't have to be 70 or 80K. And what works for that is that in this market, you're not going to find that anyways right now. You're not going to be able to find.
And that's what Andy was talking about for equity, right? Yeah. Even though you bought the house at $300,000, you spent $100,000 fixing it. The value of that property is now significantly more. The market value of the property, what that home would sell for, is more. Therefore, your equity is gone up. So yes, it might not be buku bucks in the rental department, right? Like he's saying that the rental profits are compressed, but the equity profits, the equity gap has significantly increased, and so you can hold on to it and sell it a little bit later when rates are more.
I think that's I think that's why the hold philosophy is more superior, because it gives you the two alternatives. It does give you the most of the time positive cash flow. But the more important thing by far, and the professional investor truly knows, it's the long-term, asset to their net worth, that they have an asset that's being paid by somebody else. And there, another thing that's significant that Andy talks about a lot is he's very clear on, notice how he talks about he doesn't like to use his money to do this. Well, that's very un-Dave Ramsey of him, right? That he doesn't want to use his money. He wants to finance it. And so I like Dave Ramsey. I do. But I think if Dave was on here, I would have this conversation with him. In fact, I'd love to have it with him one day. He's so harsh on the borrowing of money and the financing of money. And I always want to be like, but if it was temporary and somebody else was paying for it, then what does it matter? Why do we care whether the money was financed? To me, that's where he's at his weakest.
Well, that conversation also comes from a very different place of privilege, right? You have to have that. There's a lot of financial comfort you have to be able to say, I can just use my cash all the time to buy whatever I want.
Sure.
Average
he's in a different place. Yeah.
And he's in a different place. He's in a different part of town. So a new investor coming into this process isn't doing that. Did we lose him?
I have no idea, but I'll just add, Dave is good. Dave Ramsey is good for people that are having trouble on the consumer side. Got the credit card debt. Get out of the hole you're in. But if you want to build effectively, you have to have leverage.
That is what effective building takes time, and it takes experience. I mean, even with just a regular real estate purchase for your own self, right? When you're buying and selling a house, the first time you buy it, you're a little novice. Second time, you develop a little bit more comfort. Third and fourth time, if that happens in your lifetime, much more comfort, much more predictability, a better estimate of cost that you can do. That takes time. Like the average first-time home investor has no clue how much it costs to replace the floor, because that can also fluctuate.
It's experience, and I've worked with a lot of back of the napkin sort of equations or estimates, X percent of square foot. I mean, those things change all the time. And nowadays we go into a house, I say, this house looks kind of like the one I did a year ago, which cost me this much. So it's probably going to cost around that, maybe a little bit of inflation added in. So and I think that, Rich, is where you and I add value, the realtors that are also investors, when it comes to working with those people that are watching HGTV and say, I want to do this thing. That's great. But I think one of our jobs is to sit with them and help them understand reality. And to your comment about contractors, it's good if we have those that we can recommend and not giving legal advice or any of that fun stuff, but it's an educational process. I'm sorry.
It is an educational process. I agree. And unfortunately, I've been finding over time, finding vendors with the integrity to do a good job at their skill, at their trade, isn't always there. And sometimes that just comes with experience. So finding people and holding on to them. And again, I think they have to be compensated accordingly also. If you're looking for bottom of the barrel type work, somebody, that just has day laborers on their team and they're going to slap some floors on there, then that's probably quality of workmanship that you'll see eventually. Maybe not right away, in a year, and then you'll end up having to redo it for no reason.
Yeah, and you as a realtor that's worked with investors, and I as a realtor that has worked with investors, we've probably seen those that have done that. So now we've got the stories to relate to. I have a lot of conversation predominantly with new people that are interested in getting started, whether flipping or buy and hold or something else. And it comes down to, I think, a big portion is expectations, us understanding what they expect and helping them fine tune that, make sure they're speaking the language. And I think some of that language is financial. It is returns. It is whether it's a flip or buy and hold. What is your talk to me, tell me what you think you're going to be getting out of this. And then we're going to fine tune that.
So it's interesting. This is where I find the difference in the expectation and the advocacy that we provide for clients, whether it be in real estate or investing. When it comes to residential real estate, I find generally women, when they see a house or they like a house for themselves, they're picturing long-term what they're going to use the home for. right? And men usually see, oh my God, it costs this much, and the AC costs this much, and this, and they can't necessarily see the long-term picture. Flip it, when it comes to investing, women are the ones that are nervous about things breaking, falling apart long-term, and men can see the long-term picture very easily. They're like, yeah, I'm going to flip. I can fix this, 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 and this, and it'll cost this much. And then it will, I was like, it's so interesting how that dynamic
I've
changes.
never looked at it like that. I mean, I guess there can be a correlation.
Andy, is that been your experience when you've worked with clients?
I think I've seen the whole gamut. I've got real practical women investors that I've worked with, and
it's an interesting thought.
My wife is one of them. In fact, she's the one that sometimes has to give me a kick in the rump to get me going on some of these things, So it's pretty mixed so far.
It is a good mix. It's just, this was just, I remember, maybe it's because I'm thinking about the most recent couple or people that I've worked with. And so that's why
you're not wrong.
Well, I will say this though, if I look at my investor circles, spheres that I'm, groups or whatever that I'm in, it is predominantly men, So
yes.
I don't know if that's reflecting that mentality.
Maybe.
Doesn't have to be to the women out there. But,
absolutely no. And that's the point to make. I mean, whether it's dominated that way or not, it doesn't mean a damn thing. I mean, anybody can do it, but it does. You're right. It does seem to be that we're dealing with that on that side more often than not. But I am curious, Rich, I'm trying to think about some of mine. I'm curious if that thought process, I guess there is some kind of truth to the way I've seen that before,
I think it's, at least maybe that's how I work. I try to identify how I can connect with my client, whether it be, what is it that they need from me? What kind of advocacy are they needing from me? What kind of expertise are they needing from me? Do they need, and then I feel like you're saying, you're talking about the language part of it. Then my dialogue, my language on being able to explain a concept, explain a topic, explain it properly, I think changes when I can at least maybe that's just how I work. So I can dial in and meet the needs of the clients.
And I don't know who's watching. If it's a realtor that's watching that is not an investor, you need to learn the language so you can speak to those investors, experienced in particular. But if you're a person watching that wants to be an investor, you want to be able to express yourself and communicate to that realtor what you need to, or what you're wanting. So I got my license in 2017, but I started investing in 2012 using realtors, using other means to find property. And it was also often very frustrating for me as a non-realtor at the time to sit down with this realtor that said, yeah, I work with investors, and I would explain what it is I want. 5 years in now, we've been doing this for a while. They didn't get it. They weren't. So
it's my biggest gripe with the industry. You have so many people that are taught to cater to investors, to have their sphere full of investors. They go to investor groups and they're soliciting investor clients, and they've never done it before. And I'm like, that's a thin line to walk where you start representing somebody and you've never done it. And I want to be careful how I say this, because I do encourage agents to help people who want to purchase homes, even if it's an investor. And that's okay, but you've got to make sure at some point, if you're getting into where questions are being asked and you don't know, you better go find out from someone who knows what they're talking about. I'll give you a great example where a lot of novice real estate agents get themselves in trouble. They put somebody into a property where the person was adamant about flipping it fast. They got hard money where they're at like 15 or 16%, and they were told they've got to turn this in a month or two. And the investor had no problem knowing that could happen. And then they get to close, they're 3 days away, and they find out that it's on an FHA loan, and the anti-flip rule comes into play. And the anti-flip rule is not the middle finger, although it might as well be. The anti-flip rule says that you have to wait 90 days for that thing to turn. Well, now you got an investor that goes straight back to that agent and goes, why did you not tell me that? Now I've got 2 more months of this type of fee that I didn't want. It's in the summer, so now the power has to run on that house. This is doubling what I thought I was going to have to pay. That's one out of 1,000 examples where you have to be careful. And so Andy's right that we do have people who are watching that are real estate agents, and we will have some people who watch that are investors. Which, by the way, make sure you get our next episode on that one, because that one's going to be more geared towards you. But it's a problem, and it's hard for us because we want to encourage the guys to work with investors, but we also want them to understand. Now, for me, that's easy. Like for all of our crew, it depends who you're with too. All of our crew, we can have people that have never worked with an investor go out. And you know why that is? Because I've done 100 of them. I know how to do it. I know how to do both sides of it. I'm the one that's going to tell them what to do. That's okay. But if you got someone out there trying to do it on their own, they've never done it before, you got a real problem. And it's only a matter of time before you get your hand, slapped. And don't even get me started on commercial investing. You get someone doing that's novice at it, you're asking for a lawsuit. You're just begging for it.
I think that's a good point, Robert. And one I was pondering, a moment ago is knowing your resources. And in terms of our group, right, your team, I don't know how deep it is now in terms of agent headcount, but we have clearly myself, Richa, Alan, a number of other active and experienced investors. It's in part knowing what resources are available to you yourself and reaching out, right, when you do have questions and not being shy.
I think I do a poor job of letting our guys know that, and I shouldn't say that. We try to interact with y'all, like with the hard money sessions and stuff. We want the guys to know it, but I probably should do a better job of telling our guys we are very well versed on the investment side. I mean, we have at least 5 professional investors. I'll include myself. I haven't done it in a while just because I run the firm, but I mean, there was a time where that's all I did. And that's pretty much how I got into real estate. So when we have 5 people that really expertise on the flip side and the hold sides too. And, our group should be very thrilled at the fact that if that's something they want to do or learn, they should reach out more, because we probably don't encourage it enough.
Well, and Richa, what you commented about contractors too, think of those folks as resources for those contractors. If my contractors are great, sometimes they just disappear or they take on too much, something collapses and I need a new one. I don't go to the yellow pages if that's still around or Google. I get on the horn with my close investor network that I've built over a decade or so. Mm-hmm. That's where you need to think about your resources as well.
Actually, I want to make a point on that, because that's a great takeaway from today's show. Those of you who are real estate agents, whether you're advanced or new to investing, that's a great tip to tell a client when they're looking for their own contractors. Let's say that they're looking on their own. They haven't directly asked you. It really, there should be a forced comment in there as to, hey, look, whoever you use, make sure that they've dealt with investors before. You have an investor who has used them, because most investors won't use a contractor unless they're
unless they're vetted. I'm going to fill in a few blanks. In a decade, I've had one bad experience, and it did come from an investor buddy. But
sure it is that.
Oh no!
Hello. Oh,
you sound like a cyborg, Robert. Robert.
Well, I don't know how you do it, Richard, but when it does come to contractors, I like to check that they're insured, right? If it's that type of trade, get multiple bids.
Yep.
I'll Google them now.
Yeah. Well, I also need to see, sometimes if it's a brand new person, just because one investor friend has referred you, we still try to ask, hey, who are your references? Which one of your clients would you refer? Do you think I could talk to? And quality of workmanship, I think it's so crucial to get that just right. Otherwise you're spinning your wheels and you're redoing stuff over and over again. And it's just not worth it.
Get multiple bids. We talk about that quite a lot, and 2, I think you said it earlier, don't always go with that lowest one. You get what you pay for.
You do. And that's, but again, I think some of this stuff, unfortunately, it just comes with experience, and you have to be ready to have a couple of setbacks. And I think that's where, finding somebody that's reputable, that you can compensate appropriately for their experience and all that happens. But I just think depending on the experience, and exposure over time, it's very hard to figure out if some of these contractors have any merit or not. And it just takes time, and you have to be prepared and okay with some of the losses that come with this track. It's just not every property that you get is going to have a 10, 12, 50% return. I mean, those are very rare still as it is, right? If you're expecting, monthly rental return. But
Yeah, the
it's
state of Texas, it desperately needs more enforcement on the contract side of it. How there's not a legitimate committee that is responsible to oversee the contracting, even new builders for that matter in the state of Texas. It's just, I don't know who's got control over it, how they get away with it, but it's ridiculous. Those people should have to answer to somebody. Houses, the guts of the house. I mean, when you're talking about plumbing, electricity, foundation, how do they get away with not having to be approved by the state? I just don't get that.
Well, that, and I think like you're saying, there's no policing or enforcement of any of this, right? So a contractor will run a business and then just file bankruptcy, and then you can never find him again. So who are you going to run around and hold accountable?
Which I want to kind of tie into the start of the show when we were talking about, Robert, you asked what's the difference between a rental. What's the difference between a rental and a flip? You open the show.
No, I thought you were going to get. Yeah.
I'm going to mute and let you talk.
I thought you were going to continue with the conversations. I was just waiting there. It is because you do get back into this play of, if it is a flip, are we using someone that we don't know? And is that a risk? Are they charging us what we thought? And if we did it, and this is a common mistake by a lot of the people, is that they go with a contractor that's less because it'll maximize their profits, but they've never used them. So they're flipping a house. They get somebody in there to, fix a plumbing block or something, and it's cheaply. And then the next thing you know, they close on the house. After they fixed it, they've got what was a $1,000 plumbing issue now has become a $30,000 plumbing issue, and it's a gamble. I mean, you might as well be at the casino, because when you bring on a new contractor and you're trying to cut costs, that's probably a dangerous recipe for most people. I would almost advise most people, if you're going to go if you're flipping and you're getting a contractor that you've never dealt with, I would almost advise you to pay higher just to make sure that they did right before I would gamble with that they're going to lose everything. Now, the true conversation is talk with someone who knows, go with an agent who knows investors, that they've dealt with contractors that are proven. But if you're going to insist on doing it, my God, at least go with someone who's not fly by night, because you're just asking for trouble with that person. And there's always excuses. Always, every time something goes wrong, they have, well, I didn't know that you were going to do this, or I didn't know you were going to do that. And it never ceases to amaze me how much trouble is caused by trying to save a few bucks, when if you just paid a little bit more, you're like, well, that would have not been a problem had you done this. And when you're flipping, just like Andy said, it's a great transition to end this particular show, which could go on forever, the way we talk about these things. You have to look at, when it comes to flipping, am I going to get in there and am I going to do it quick? If I am going to do it quick, do I have the right people to do that job that will do it efficiently, and they will do it cost worthy enough for me that it's going to work for my numbers to justify this is a flip and I want to do this? And if I'm looking at a property that I'm going to hold, is there a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to do to get this property ready? And is there going to be a lot of things I have to keep doing to it to hold it? One of the things on the hold side of it is, if it's an older property, a lot of times we have to look at, where's the air condition at right now? I mean, are we in year 12 or are we in year 14? Is that going to have to be replaced? Are we looking at an aged a foundation that has been fixed years ago that continues to shift? We have to look at stuff like that and say, this is going to be paid by somebody else. We're looking to hold it, but is it going to cause us problems? One of the bigger problems that we have with holding is a novice investor gets in and they start talking about positive cash flow. Now, let me tell you, positive cash flow is not plus $100 or plus $200. I've never viewed that as positive cash flow, because to me, that is always one air condition away from breaking, from me being in the red for a year or two. To me, positive cash flow is when you're like, $400 or $500 a month, and you can overcome those types of repairs. Too many novice investors get in so close to the screws that they're like, oh, this will be fine. I'm like, there are problems that happen with those. Becoming a homeowner can suck sometimes, even though it's the livelihood of our business. There's problems that go around with that. Is that not right, Andy?
Absolutely. But to your comment, that's why I go in and I replace that AC up front and I replace that water heater up front. And
because
then
you
I
want
don't
to
have to
know.
deal with
You want to know.
Especially if it's at the end of its life, it's just not work. What's going to end up happening generally, right? They're like, oh, just this wire or this little tube is low or what, and you replace that tube. What good is a brand new tube that was built in 2022 for a machine that was built in 1983?
Well, especially with the air conditioners.
How long is that going to last?
They're all going through that right now with the Freon. And, I think a great way to end the show is that last takeaway from Andy and Richard commenting on it, but really focusing in on not the fact that it was an air condition, but the fact of what he said. When he goes in there, he doesn't want the surprise to be later. If he's going to buy that property, he knows that air condition probably is going to be shot in a year or two. He's not buying it so that he can have his positive cash flow, hoping that air condition holds out. He's going in it knowing, hey, look, it's going to have to be replaced one way or the other. I'm going to do it now. I'm putting it as part of the budget to make sure these numbers already make sense. If they make sense with the new air condition in there, it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do it. And I thought that's a really significant comment. There's a lot of people that invest that's the last thing they do. They're like, no, we'll let it go as long as we can. And we'll
Robert, you're getting very cyborg vibes.
Am I back now? Am I back?
You're digitizing.
You're digitizing. You're falling apart. You're abstracting. We can't hear you. Nope.
Yeah. This is the last time I do this show in this.
Is he at Keller Williams? Where is he?
I think he's at the office. Poor guy.
Okay.
I am. I am at the office. It's a terrible internet. Well, with that said, I'm going to get off this one. I want to thank everybody for watching today. My fault and apologies of the technology. The last time I do the show in this office here, the internet of all places, my office is the worst. So I want to thank Rich. I want to thank Andy. Y'all check out our second episode that we're going to be pushing out here. It's going to really talk about if you want to be an investor. Thank y'all for watching. Pass the show on. Thank you for always supporting the show. We will catch up with y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Take care.
Bye.